Excuse me.
Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Keith Liscio, the president of Excelsior Franchise Center in affiliation with the Franchise Broker Association. Thank you so much for being here, Keith. We're happy to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So, Keith, diving right into things, can you tell me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to become a career ownership coach?
Sure. So, I've always been involved in business. When I was a little boy, my dad owned a dry cleaning shop, a liquor store, a meat market. And so, even from the time I was a young kid, I was always behind a counter making change, stocking shelves. And I always knew I wanted to be in business, but I thought I wanted to do something more important, more corporate. So, I got my business degree from Villanova University and went on and got an MBA from the Wharton School and worked at places like Procter and Gamble and Nabisco and Kraft in marketing roles. But always knew that at some point I wanted to have my own business. And my first business was importing Italian ceramics. And so that was a really fun business. I got to go to Italy a lot, did it for a decade and never really made any serious money. And at the time, I had two young kids and college looming around the corner. So I decided, I probably need to get back into a more corporate role so I could, for earning potential. And I actually went to interview with a company called Management Recruiters International, which ironically is a franchise business. In fact, it's in my inventory now. If you wanted to buy a Management Recruiters International franchise, I could help you to buy that. But at the end of the interview, they said, Keith, we really think our client would like you, but we think you'd be better served working here with us. And so one thing led to another, and I became an executive recruiter. And I did that for them for a few years, and then they made some changes. And it just made more sense for me to go and do it on my own. And so I started my own recruiting firm, and I did that for almost 20 years. So I did that for a long time. That was the bulk of my professional career. And when I sold my interest in that firm, I actually thought maybe I would retire and just felt at some point it was just too soon for me to do that. And I looked to actually buy a franchise business. And in the course of doing my franchise due diligence, I sort of stumbled into this area of franchise brokering, which I didn't even know was a thing. And as someone who'd spent 20 some years as an executive recruiter, I just felt for me, this was a much better use of my skill set, a much better fit for me personally. And because I have such a wide variety of business experience from small businesses to franchise businesses, MRI was a franchise. In college, I flipped hamburgers for McDonald's. So I knew something about franchising. And then, my skills kind of being a matchmaker. So now instead of matching people from one corporate job to another, I move them often from the corporate world into the world of business ownership.
That is such an extensive background. Very, very cool that even your dad started out in business ownership himself, and now you're doing it yourself too, which is really cool. Also, traveling to Italy all the time, what a pain that must have been.
It was horrible, and I had to do it at least twice a year.
Too good. Well, you work with a variety of different people, and when working with your clients specifically, what is your process for understanding their goals, their skills, and their financial needs before recommending a business to them?
Well, generally, it starts with kind of an informal interview. I want to learn as much about them as I can. Often, as you know, people don't really understand the franchise process. They don't understand franchise businesses. When they think of franchising, they often are thinking McDonald's or Subway, not Schoolie Mitchell. And for many people, McDonald's or Subway are not the right fit, and Schoolie Mitchell might be perfect. But we have, there's 800 brands in my portfolio. And so my job is to kind of learn as much as I can about the candidate and what kinds of things might be the right fit for them. And then we also have an assessment tool we use. It's almost like a personality profile that's been developed specifically for the franchise industry. And so it takes 10 or 15 minutes for a candidate to fill this out, and it instantly will produce a report that shows me their values, their preferred working style, their communication style, their sales orientation, and a lot more. But most specifically, it will help me to match them to specific franchises where people with their profile have already been successful. So it takes that, 800, franchise portfolio down to a much smaller subset. And then, we have 37 different categories of businesses. So I will go through that category list and get a sense of what kinds of things might spark a passion in somebody, or what kinds of things might be a really good fit for that person. And then I do research on their behalf and come up with some really tailored options just for them.
Very cool. 800 different businesses. My goodness, that's so many. So, how do you kind of vet and evaluate the franchises before actually recommending them to your clients?
So, as you know, I'm affiliated with the Franchise Brokers Association, and the FBA does a lot of that vetting for us. So they help establish relationships with really high quality franchises that offer terrific support. They help to educate us. They maintain a database for us, and that really is probably the bulk of the corporate clients that I work with. Now, that said, there are some franchises that just don't want to be part of a network like the FBA.
Yeah.
And so I have a number of independent relationships that I've established over the years, but I would say probably 90 or 95% of the brands that I'm presenting are companies that have been affiliated with the FBA, vetted by the FBA, and I feel comfortable and confident in presenting them because of that.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's awesome that you have a network behind you supporting and doing some of that due diligence so that you can do
Exactly.
your job even more effectively with your
Right.
client. That's
Yeah.
so important.
If I had to, find 800 different brands, research them to make sure that they were all on the up and up, and that they all had, really good and well developed systems, and then sign them all to a contract, it would, I would still be in the infancy stages of my business instead of being, 3 years in and very successful.
Absolutely. So you work with so many different people, but how do you tailor your approach to someone that has a different financial situation? We know that some people are coming in with a very high net worth and some people are coming
Mhm.
into this with nothing. How do you adjust your process around financial needs?
Well, having an open and frank discussion about what people are making currently, how much money they have currently, that does direct the process to some extent. We have options that range from under $50,000 all in to over $10 million, and so kind of a knowing sort of where somebody fits in that continuum is important, and also what somebody's expectations are. Some people, boy, if they could get to a six figures income, they'd be really, really happy. And I have a candidate I'm working with right now who, in 5 years, he wants to be earning $1 million a year. Both of those are very possible, but the strategy behind each is very different. And so I'm going to show them brands where each of them can achieve their goals um, effectively.
Very cool. So, what's maybe walk me through an example of maybe one of your client placements that you've had with any different brand, and how did you work through that whole process? And maybe walk through maybe a challenging one. The easy ones are easy where you present three different brands and they're like, I love this one, and they move forward. But
Yes.
talk to me about a challenging one where maybe you had to go
Yeah.
back and forth a few times.
I think the instances are where I've presented 3 brands and they've loved one of them is probably far and few between. They almost always are offering some kind of challenge.
Yeah.
And often the challenge comes from the fact that, candidates often just don't know what they don't know. There's
Mm.
so many different businesses out there. Schooley Mitchell is a terrific example. This is a great business. It's very well defined. It's very successful. It's been around for a long time, but it's in an area where people just don't even know that that's a thing. Expense reduction. No, who would know that even is a thing, or that it could be a
Yeah.
franchise business. And so a part of what I'm doing is to show people things that they haven't seen before. And often, as I mentioned, people are often coming to me because they think they want to be in a quick serve restaurant.
Yeah.
And and one of the problems with quick serve restaurants is the startup costs are really high. I mean, it's you're going to spend a minimum of 400 or 500,000, sometimes much more than that, to get into a QSR. And sometimes people just aren't prepared. There's kind of a sticker shock that goes with that. And
Yeah.
I had a woman a couple of years ago who really, she just thought that what her town needed was a really good breakfast oriented restaurant. And I actually have some good ones in my portfolio.
Mm,
But she was she was looking to invest 150 to $200,000 max, and that's just out of range for what she was looking to do. But
yeah.
she was, in my profile kind of tagged her as a societal, somebody that is looking to be somebody who can help others, who's not motivated strictly by the bottom line. She wants to make an impact in her
Yeah.
community. In fact, that's one of the reasons she was looking for the breakfast restaurant, because her community didn't have that. And she wanted that for her community. She thought that'd be a good business idea. But I was able to find her something else that was very, very different, another brand that, you probably never would have heard of, but basically something where she could have a real impact on young kids and families, and a much, much lower price point, much lower investment level. And she's done really, really well there.
Oh, that's great. So it was the right fit, the right time, the right amount of money. It
Yeah.
was a perfect fit all the way
And
around.
that's what the key is. It's not what I'm recommending. It's what's the right fit for each individual candidate. And everybody's bringing something to the table, and everybody wants to get something different out of their business, whether it's
Yeah.
lifestyle, whether it's money, whether it's a legacy for their family. If they're, somebody that's going to be happy, running one territory, or somebody that's an empire builder that wants to have a whole region. Everybody's different. And so my role is to really help them find the thing that's going to be the right business for them.
Yeah, I like that. So, Keith, you've been in franchising for quite some time now. So, what do you believe is, I guess, what is the most common misconceptions around franchising?
There's a couple of them. One is that buying a franchise is like buying a money machine, that it's a completely passive investment, like investing your money in the stock market. And, you're going to buy a business and you're going to hire a manager, and then you just sit back and wait for the profits to roll in. And that's generally not how it works. If it is how it worked, then there wouldn't be franchises. Companies like yours would just hire people all over the country
Mhm,
to run outlets for them. And so there's a difference between a chain and a
mhm.
franchise. Um, and franchising it's a business, and you've got to work that business. Now, there are certainly some businesses that can be run more passively than others. There are some where you can put a manager in place to kind of handle the day-to-day activity, but somebody needs to manage that manager, and somebody needs to manage the KPIs of the business. And so people really need to understand all that. And that's one of the things when people come in with that attitude, I kind of have to, explain to them that, if your manager doesn't come in or quits, who's going to open the door? I mean, it's your business,
Yeah,
you're responsible. So I think that's kind of an eye opener to some people.
absolutely, it is. Absolutely. Well, this has been lovely, Keith, and thank you for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it. And I
Well,
love to get
thank
to
you
know
for
you
having me.
more and your background and the impact that you are personally making on franchising is super cool.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.